Sabaniv wrote back in the century before last, "The bobber should stick out of the water no more than half a centimeter, only the antenna and nothing else." Most of our fishermen set it to 5 centimeters and some even 10. And then they wonder, there are fish, but they aren't biting. The bobber stands dead still, but in reality, they are biting. They feel the bait, touch it, taste it, and every time they feel the resistance of this bobber sticking out of the water like a buoy and leave quietly without a single movement on the surface. You sit, watch, and know nothing. Today we will talk exactly about this, about why experienced fishermen return with a catch, while those nearby with an empty keep net. And it's almost never about the fish, it's about the tackle. In this video, we will break down the main mistakes of a float fisher. Let's start with weighting. This is the foundation of everything. Without understanding this point, everything else doesn't work. We will break down how to properly distribute the weights along the line, which bobber to choose for specific conditions, how to properly hook the bait, and why the majority do it wrong. We will talk about the line and the leader, about ground bait, and about the length of the rod. All of this specifically with examples without fluff. By the end of the video, you will have the full picture. What exactly is preventing you from catching fish right now, and how to fix it in a single fishing trip. So let's start with the most important thing, the thing without which everything else is just a set of parts that don't work together. Weighting the bobber. Write in the comments how you usually set your bobber. Does only the antenna stick out above the water or more? Look, here is the point. A bobber is not just a float, it's a signaling device. Its task is to transmit to you the slightest touch of a fish to the bait. Any touch. The lightest touch. A fish came up, touched the worm with its lips, and you immediately saw it. The bobber twitched, and you set the hook. This is how it should work. But what happens when the bobber sticks out of the water by 5 centimeters? Or by 10, it turns into a buoy, into a heavy, immovable object that the fish is forced to pull under before you even notice anything. Imagine, a crucian carp came up, took the bait, felt the resistance of this body in the water, and spit everything out. The bobber didn't even flinch, and you sit there thinking, they aren't biting. Sabaniv wrote about this very clearly. The bobber must be balanced so that the tip sticks out of the water no more than 5 to 6 millimeters. Only the antenna, thin, light, and nothing more. That is exactly when the tackle becomes truly sensitive. That is exactly when the most delicate touch of a fish to the bait makes the bobber react. I saw this with my own eyes at a village pond where we went every summer. A guy was sitting nearby. He had a huge red bobber sticking out of the water by almost 2 hand widths. He sat for 3 hours and got nothing. I moved a little to the left, set the weights properly, and over the next half hour pulled out 4 decent crucian carp. He looked at me as if I was cheating, but I just properly weighted the bobber. How to do this technically? You take the bobber, select the weights for it. Usually this is a set of small split shots, and you gradually add them to the line until the bobber sinks almost completely. Above the water there should remain only the antenna, a thin strip that you see and that the fish will pull under at the slightest bite. This is called proper weighting. An important detail. The weights shouldn't be bunched up in one place. This is a separate mistake that we will talk about in the next section. But right now, remember the main rule. The bobber is weighted down to the antenna. If the body sticks out above the water, you are missing bites. Every single time, guaranteed. By the way, this applies to any fish, not just crucian carp. Roach, bream, silver bream. They all bite hesitantly, especially in calm weather, in the heat, during periods when the fish are full and cautious. They test the bait rather than grabbing it. And if your bobber doesn't feel this touch, you simply will never know that a fish was nearby. Now for the next mistake. It is made even by those who already know about weighting down to the antenna. A person properly sank the bobber, left only the antenna sticking out, good job. But they gathered all their weights into one bunch right above the leader. One big piece of lead hangs on the line like a kettlebell, and they think the tackle is set up. No, the tackle is not set up. Here is what happens. The fish takes the bait and immediately feels the weight of this kettlebell. One movement and it drops it. The bobber barely twitched. You didn't have time to react. The fish is gone. At the same time, outwardly, it looks as if there is no bite at all. The correct setup looks different. Sabaneve described this even in relation to roach and IDE, fish whose bite is subtle and cautious. The weights should be arranged along the line in a chain. Several split shots at a distance from each other, with the larger ones higher up closer to the bobber, and the smaller ones lower, closer to the hook. And a very small split shot, the so-called telltale weight, directly on the leader 7 to 10 centimeters from the hook. Why is this needed? When the fish takes the bait, it lifts the telltale weight, the small split shot. This exact movement is transmitted to the bobber. The fish doesn't feel the entire mass of the tackle. It only feels this light telltale weight and therefore doesn't drop the bait immediately. The bobber meanwhile goes down or slightly to the side and you set the hook. This is a fundamental difference. One big kettlebell, the fish feels it, gets scared, and leaves. A chain of light split shots with a telltale weight, the fish takes it confidently, you have time to react. Anisimov in his Encyclopedia of Fishing also writes about this directly. Several weights placed at some distance from each other increase the sensitivity of the tackle. This is not theory, this is practice. Proven by generations of fishermen. What does the correct rig look like in still water? The main weight is 50-60 centimeters from the hook, then one or two smaller split shots lower down, and a very small telltale weight on the leader. As a result, the total weight of all these split shots weights the bobber down to the antenna, but at the same time, each individual split shot is light, the fish barely feels it. In a current, the setup is slightly different. The weights are distributed in an even chain, and the telltale weight is placed very close to the hook at 5 to 15 centimeters. This prevents the current from lifting the bait and carrying it upwards. The bait moves naturally as if it's drifting on its own. Remember a simple rule. One big weight means bottom fishing and a ledger rig. Float tackle works with several light split shots. Break up your weight and you will immediately feel the difference. The third mistake, and it's made by almost everyone who buys bobbers based on one principle: pretty, bright, big. One bobber for all occasions. A quiet pond. This one. A river with a current. The exact same one. The wind picked up. Oh well, the main thing is that it's visible. This is wrong. A bobber is not a decoration, it's a tool. And like any tool, it has a specific purpose. Look at how it works. You arrive at a quiet pond, no wind, the water is like glass. You take an elongated, needle-shaped bobber with a thin antenna. It will land in the water with almost no splash, will stand perfectly vertically, and will show you the slightest movement, any touch of a fish, and you see it. Such a bobber creates minimal resistance when submerged. Almost nothing prevents the fish from pulling it under. But as soon as the wind picks up, this same bobber will start tossing on the waves. You won't understand if it's a bite or just ripples. In such weather, you need a teardrop-shaped bobber, stable, with a long keel. It's not as sensitive, but it stands in the water dead still. You clearly see only a real bite and not every wave. Now let's take a river with a current. There you need a bobber with a long keel and two attachment points to the line, at the bottom and higher up. Why two? Because if the bobber is attached only at the bottom and the current pulls the line, it starts to tilt and move at an angle. The weighting gets thrown off, sensitivity is lost. Two attachments hold it vertically, and then it works correctly. For a fast current and great depth, an inverted teardrop shape works well. The buoyancy is higher, the stability is better. One of the readers once wrote to me in the comments, "I put a bobber with a thin antenna on the river and couldn't tell if they were biting or not. The bobber was moving all the time. It turned out it was the current." I advised him to put on a bobber with an elongated keel and two attachment points. On the next fishing trip, he wrote, "In 2 hours, I caught 8 roach." One more thing, the size of the bobber must match the conditions. On calm water with no wind, the smaller the bobber, the better. A small bobber scares the fish less, resists less when submerged. Sabaneve wrote directly, "Bream, a cautious fish, and a crude large float often won't show a bite at all because the fish will feel the resistance and spit out the bait before the bobber has time to move." A simple rule: calm water, a thin needle-shaped or elongated bobber, minimal size. Wind and waves, teardrop-shaped, stable. Current, long keel, 2 attachments. Now a mistake that seems obvious but which is made constantly. I'm talking about thick fishing line. Ask any beginner fisherman, why do you need such a thick line? And you will hear the exact same answer. So a trophy fish doesn't break off. So a large fish doesn't get away. You can understand this logic, but it works exactly the opposite way. Here is the thing. Thick line is highly visible in the water. The fish sees it, the crucian carp sees it, the bream sees it, the roach sees it even better. A cautious fish simply won't approach the bait if a thick, highly visible line is dangling nearby. You wait for a bite? There isn't one. Not because there are few fish, but because the fish read you and is keeping its distance. I understood this back in childhood, although back then, of course, I didn't phrase it that way. Crucian carp completely eluded me, and to be honest, I just gave up trying to catch them. While my father patiently sat with a bobber and waited for those slow, cautious bites, I would go to the shore to catch gobies. No bobber, I just dropped the bait right at the bottom near the rocks, and they took it immediately, without fuss. It didn't work that way with crucian carp. I thought the fish was difficult, not for me, but in reality the line was just too thick, and a few more mistakes that I didn't know about then. Write in the comments, do you hide the point of the hook in the bait or leave it exposed? I wonder how everyone does it. So anyway, about the line. For a pole float rod, the optimal diameter of the main line is from 0.12 to 0.8 millimeter. The leader is thinner, from 0.10 to 0.14. Why is the leader thinner than the main line? Precisely so that during a snag or when catching an unexpectedly large fish, only the leader breaks and not the entire tackle along with the bobber and weights. The leader broke, you attach a new one in half a minute and continue fishing. Some will say, but on a thin line, a large fish will break off. Maybe once a season, but on the other hand, on a thin line, you will see the bites of that large fish, which wouldn't even approach a thick one. You won't even get bites on it. The fish will simply leave. It's better to have one large fish break off, but you will see bites. It's a fair trade. And Nisimov in the Encyclopedia of Fishing gives specific numbers. For float fishing for roach, the line is from 0.14 to 0.20 millimeter. The leader is from 0.10 to 0.12 millimeter. For crucian carp, up to 0.18 to 0.25 millimeter on the main line, because the fish is larger and stronger, but the leader is always thinner. Always. And one more thing. A leader is absolutely necessary. Not just a thin line from the hook to the weight, but a separate leader tied to the main line via a loop. This allows you to quickly change it when it breaks. Put on different hooks for different baits without retying the entire tackle. This saves time and nerves right while fishing. The next mistake is one of the most frequent, and yet it cannot be seen. It happens right in your hands when you hook the bait. Most fishermen try to hide the point of the hook inside the worm or maggot, out of the reasoning that the fish will see the hook and get scared. This logic sounds reasonable, but it is not correct. A fish doesn't know what a hook is. To it, it's just a metal object of unknown shape. It doesn't know that it's dangerous. A crucian carp hasn't read about fishing. It simply eats what smells like food and looks like food. The problem with a hidden point is different. When a fish takes the bait and you set the hook, the point pokes into the soft flesh of the worm and not into the fish's tissue. You yank the bait out of its mouth and that's it. There was a bite, but no fish. This is especially critical during cautious biting, when the fish takes it gently, takes it, squeezes slightly, and immediately lets go. A split second. If the point isn't exposed, you will never hook it. The rule is simple and unequivocal. The point of the hook must stick out always. A worm is hooked from the head, the tail is free, the point is brought out of the body. This is the correct baiting. A maggot is threaded so that the point slightly comes out or catches the skin at the end, remaining on the surface. Yes, sometimes the fish sees the metal of the hook, but for a cautious fish, a thick line, improper weighting, and crude behavior of the tackle are much scarier. We have already talked about this. The thin point of the hook doesn't scare the fish. proven by generations of fishermen. The only exception is when catching with a nightcrawler or a very large worm, when the fish sucks on the bait for a long time. You can hide the point in the tail, but only during a good, confident bite. Sabaniv wrote about this technique in relation to catching bream and tench, fish that take slowly and suck on the bait, not swallowing it immediately. But this is a special case, not the rule. In most situations, the point should be exposed. This increases the number of hooked fish by several times. Just try it once, and you will feel it yourself. Let's talk about depth. This is a mistake that cannot be seen from the outside, but the fish feels it. Most fishermen set their bobber something like this. They throw it into the water, the depth seems normal, and they leave it. The bait dangles somewhere in the water column, maybe half a meter from the bottom, maybe a meter. They catch random fish that swim by. But most of the fish we catch on a float, crucian carp, bream, roach, silver bream, feed near the bottom or right off the bottom. Crucian carp is generally a bottom fish. It digs in the silt, looks for food right at the bottom. If your bait is hanging a meter and a half above the bottom, the crucian carp will simply pass by. It won't rise for food that is higher than its feeding horizon. The rule is this: the bait must lie on the bottom or hang 1 or 2 centimeters from it. This is exactly why you need to properly measure the depth before fishing, using the bobber and the weight. You move the bobber up the line until the weight touches the bottom. The bobber will then lie horizontally or slightly tilt. You see the bottom. You fix the position, and from there you set the working depth. Now about the length of the line. This is also a frequent mistake. For a pole rod, the rule is simple. The length of the line along with the leader should roughly equal the length of the rod. Not half a meter longer, not half a meter shorter, exactly the length of the rod. Then the cast turns out accurate and neat. You easily control the tackle and quickly set the hook. If the line is longer than the rod, when setting the hook, you waste time taking up the extra slack. If it's shorter, you can't cast properly. And one more point that combines depth and line length. Many fishermen set up a pole rod, but at the same time attach a reel to it. This makes the tackle heavy, inconvenient, and completely changes the principle of operation. A pole rod is about lightness and simplicity. No reels, no guide rings. Just the rod, line the length of the rod, the rig, and that's it. This is an honest, time-tested tackle, and it works exactly like this, and no other way. Write in the comments, do you use ground bait while fishing, or do you do without it? This is perhaps the most controversial point, because everyone knows someone who says, why use ground bait? I catch fine without it. Or, feeding is for wimps. Here is what I will say. In 95% of cases, ground bait increases the catch. This is a fact, proven by Sabaniv, by modern fishermen, and simply by common sense. Fish come to where it smells like food. If you have created a feeding spot, you have gathered the fish. If you haven't, you wait until they accidentally end up near your hook. The question is not whether ground bait is needed. The question is how to use it correctly. Sabaniv wrote about this back in the century before last. The goal of ground bait is not to feed the fish to satiety, but to stimulate its appetite. You should never throw too much. This is the surest way to ruin the fishing. A fed fish doesn't bite, it's full. Proper ground baiting is 2 or 3 balls the size of a small apple before starting to fish. You throw them exactly into the casting spot. You wait 15 to 20 minutes for the fish to gather. Then if the bite starts to die down, you throw 1 more small ball the size of a walnut, no more. The composition is the simplest. Breadcrumbs, rolled oats, a little millet, a pinch of ground coriander or vanilla. You can buy a ready-made mix, add a little soil from the bank for viscosity. The balls must be dense, reach the bottom, and only break apart there, creating a feeding cloud. The only case when ground bait might not work is early spring, cold water. Fish in cold water are sluggish. Their metabolism is slowed down, they barely eat. At such a time, an excess of ground bait can even scare the fish away. Too much cloudiness, too much smell. Then it's better to bait one spot, try it, and if it doesn't work, fish nearby without ground bait. But in the warm season, ground bait is always a must. It's not up for debate. The last mistake, and it seems the most simple, but it is exactly because of it that people fish uncomfortably, get tired, make uncoordinated casts, and miss bites. We are talking about the length of the rod. The rule is one, the rod must match the fishing spot. If the fish are 3 meters from the shore, take a 3 or 4 meter rod. Fishing with a 5 meter rod in the bushes, where there is no room to swing, is torture. Fishing with a 3 meter rod on open water, where the fish are 6 meters away, means fishing where the fish aren't. Before fishing, look at the spot where the fish are. Behind the reeds means you need a rod that will clear those reeds and place the bait behind them. Open water, longer to reach a promising spot. If there are overhanging trees, take a shorter one so as not to catch branches on every cast. In practice, most float fishers in Russia fish with pole rods from 5 to 6 meters long. This is a universal size for most bodies of water, ponds, small lakes, river backwaters. It allows you to place the bait 5 to 7 meters from the shore. Convenient, accurate, manageable. One more point about choosing a spot. This is directly related to the length of the rod, because the right spot requires the right tool. Don't cast your tackle where it's convenient to cast. Cast it where the fish are. Drop-offs, depth boundaries, windows of clear water among the grass, quiet backwaters with a silty bottom. That is where the fish feed. An even open bank with the same depth along its entire length is the worst spot. Look for features in the bottom relief. Look for boundaries, look for cover, and place your bait there with properly tuned tackle. Here are 8 mistakes that deprive a fisherman of a catch. Not one of them, not two, but all together. This is exactly the main point. Each of these mistakes on its own might seem like a trifle. So what if the bobber sticks out a little higher? So what? So what if the line is a little thicker? Nonsense. So what if the point is hidden? It's more convenient. But when all these trifles add up together, the tackle stops working entirely. The fish are nearby, there are many of them, but they aren't biting. And you leave with an empty keep net, thinking that today they just weren't biting. But in reality, you were fishing with improperly tuned tackle. Therefore, go through this list before your next fishing trip. Check every point. Set the bobber down to the antenna. Distribute the weights in a chain. Choose a bobber for the conditions. Put on a thin line and leader. Hook the bait with an exposed point. Measure the depth and set the tackle to the bottom. Bait the spot before fishing. Take a rod of the right length. Do all this, and on your next fishing trip, you will feel the difference. Not tomorrow, not in a year, on your next fishing trip. This is proven. If these insights change the way you look at your float and tackle, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the fishing wisdom that history tried to bury. Let's cast into a better future. The next treasure of knowledge will be open soon. Tight lines. See you by the water.